So Amy, I got my dinner from the local and it was excellent.
Excellent. That's
Some sort
terrific.
of noodles, and I got the Brussels sprouts, like my favorite go-to.
And
Sounds delicious.
I got the steak tips
Yep.
and
Were
the
they
mashed,
done well?
and we got a side salad. It was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah. Anyone go to Flores?
Mm,
Not Flores? I
no.
haven't been there since the summer, but I'd like to head back. Hey, Allison.
I went to Blue Ribbon.
Nice.
You know, we are so lucky to have a place like Blue Ribbon right down the road from us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
people come
I got the
from
veggie
all over
burrito
just-
and we got some meat and no.
Yeah.
And I look forward to eating the dinner after, after this.
Whenever you get a hankering for some ribs, I go to Blue Ribbon and get a little rack of ribs.
Yeah. I
Well,
think
you
we
know, you can get vegetarian there too. So I'm just,
Oh, my
saying you
daughters,
can get that.
my daughters are coming into town for a few days, so we'll get vegetarian.
There you go.
I eat vegetarian and I love Blue Ribbon.
Mhm.
I told Martha to check out Clover when your kids are in town.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they'll like it, right? That's
Yeah, I
vegetarian.
Oh,
really like it.
excellent.
I started getting food from them during the pandemic, they have these different food boxes. I thought they were great.
All
I also
right.
heard there are 2 new bakeries opening in Newton.
Oh, where?
One's in Nonantum, and one is over in Upper Falls.
Oh,
There's
very
one
nice.
in Tate's coming to Newton Center too, I
And
think.
yes, yeah,
So 3.
yeah. So it's time to like do a little bit
Slim
more.
down so we can bulk up.
More
And then
running.
running with
More
Amy.
running.
Yeah. I just started going to a Cocoa Bakery. That's a fine establishment. And the lines there on Saturday morning are incredibly long.
Yes, yes.
I think it's like Japanese fusion or something.
Mhm.
Japanese French fusion. It's nice seeing the faces behind the names, honestly, for me. Like I didn't know what Mike Halley, what you look like, but it's nice to see you. And hi, MB.
Hey, I don't show up in mirrors, so
Oh no.
luckily I show up on camera.
All right. Looks like we've got a good crew with us today. So why don't we go ahead and get started? My name is Allison Rice. I am the campaign director for this campaign to elect Amy Moss-Angiolo as mayor. We're really excited to have you all join us today. I want to just kick off a few ground rules and set the tone for this meeting, and then I'll send it over to Amy to get started. I just want to note that this will be an interactive conversation. We're going to use a lot of the tools that Zoom has to offer us, including the raise hand function and the polling function that you'll see at the bottom of your screen and that will pop up on your screen respectively. And we ask that you use the chat function to ask questions and share any opinions throughout the program this evening. We ask that folks remain muted during this time unless we note otherwise. And like I said, we'll be asking using the poll function. Questions will pop up on your screen and all you'll have to do is click your answer. We'll refrain from opening the floor to folks to speak out loud, but we'll be highlighting comments that are shared in the chat. So please use that function during the program, and we may occasionally call on folks to offer details about any comments they've shared. So if you are called on, please unmute yourself to speak and remute yourself when you're finished speaking. Lastly, or second to last, we want to ensure that this conversation is both informative and productive. So we want to remind folks that we are able to manually mute folks if anyone has trouble maintaining a productive environment. That includes muting your mic and turning off the camera. But don't worry about that. Just make sure that you are engaged and productive and respectful. And lastly, a reminder that this is being streamed live to Facebook and is being recorded, and that includes the chat and the answers to all polls, though you can choose to answer polls anonymously. So with that, I'm really, really excited to kick it over to Amy to get this started.
Well, thank you so much, Allie, for telling us all about the ground rules. I just wanted to recognize, I think 2 city councilors are on here, Andrea Kelly and Julia Maliki. So thank you for joining us. Thank you all for taking your time out of your busy evening to join our conversation about West Newton Square. Hopefully lots of you went a little bit out of your way to grab some dinner from one of Newton's local restaurants before this event. You may have, if you joined us, we were talking about some of the places that we went. I went to Blue Ribbon. I know some people went to the local. But even if you don't live in or near the square, many of you throughout Newton travel through either to visit its businesses or on your way to other places. So it's fair to say that West Newton Square affects the daily lives of many of us. So using the polling function, let's see who picked up food from a local restaurant.
Wow, looks like so far Patty's is the biggest contender, I think. Mango taco.
Excellent. We probably should have put in the poll. What did you order? Well, terrific. Well, so some of the objectives of holding this forum tonight. The purpose is to bring the community together in a productive fashion, to share your experiences and to look forward, finding ways to make Newton even better than it is now. After all, that's what all of us want. I think the best way to do that is to include as many residents as possible in decision making, so we hear from diverse voices with different interests and opinions. Once again, keeping in mind that our overall objective is to make Newton better. I decided to hold this forum because I received lots of communication from residents that they're not happy with the recent changes to the square. And we saw lots of feedback about traffic patterns in the square on online forums like Facebook and Nextdoor Newton. I had someone video me as I drove through it a few months ago to find out what they were talking about. At the time, I found it tough to navigate, but recently I've seen that changes have been made since then, like new lines painted on the road and signage, and also lights. So one of the questions we'll be addressing is, what do you think of it now? So to help us structure this session, and because we want to make sure that it stays productive, we're going to leverage the city's Village Visioning Kit and apply it to West Newton Square. We'll then forward this feedback to the city with the goal of making our villages even better. So I'm just curious, with a show of hands, how many of you heard about the Village Visioning Kits? And who has filled out a kit? Can't see everybody. So it looks like a good number of you have either heard of it or have tried to participate in it. I participated in 2. I participated one in Four Corners, and there were only 6 other people with me at the time. And I participated one that was led by the Ward 2 city councilors in Newtonville. I thought it was a good, productive discussion around the issues, but I was very disappointed about the participation rate. So that's why we're hoping to fill this out. So let's kick this off. The first poll question is, how many live within 10-minute walking distance of West Newton?
Let's give it a couple of seconds here for folks to answer. We're getting some good answers coming in. A lot of folks are saying yes, about 79% of participants so far. We'll give it a few more seconds. Looks like most of us are saying yes here tonight, which is great because we get that good visibility into the area from you all.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, when I participated in the one at Four Corners, there were only 6 people, and I believe 4 of them were not from the area. So it's really good to make sure that we're reaching out to the community that's most affected. Okay, so let's go on to some of the topics that's covered in this visioning kit. So let's go to accessibility and transportation. We're going to combine those. So let's talk about sort of the big elephant in the room, the redesign of West Newton Square. So does this area seem physically accessible?
Hmm. We're sort of back and forth here. Mostly yes. We'll give it a couple more seconds and then I'll share those results.
Now, do we mean physically accessible by foot or by car?
That's a good question. I guess I focus it on by foot.
Okay.
Looks like we had about 68% of respondents saying yes.
Okay, interesting. So are there public places to sit?
Looking good so far. Again, about 75% of folks saying yes. Thanks all for participating so far. This is great. A really great use of this function. So I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. We have 77% of folks saying yes.
That's good. So how do you move through West Newton Square? Do you bike, do you walk, or do you drive?
Right, mostly drivers here. Give it a few more seconds. And again, if you if you move through West Newton Square in another way, definitely tell us in the chat. Transit, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll and share our results. But 82% of people drive.
It looks like a good percentage, 53% walk, but only 6% bike. So here's the next question is, does the area feel safe as a driver, as a pedestrian, or as a biker?
Results coming in here. A lot of folks are saying as drivers, no, it does not feel safe. We're kind of in the middle overall, pretty solid as pedestrians, not safe as bikers. So that's some really good feedback there. I'll give it a few more seconds and then I'll go ahead and share the results of this poll as well.
Oh, some people are saying they have trouble, or never mind.
Sorry, what was that?
I noticed some people typing in the chat they were unable to submit, and it could be that they had to select each option and they may not, I don't know. Like it was just, yeah.
Hopefully the next one will work then, maybe because there's multiple options to your point. These are the results from our most recent poll. Looks like overall, folks don't feel safe in the area as drivers. About 67% of folks said no. 62% as pedestrians said yes, and 77% as bikers said no.
Is there a way to, Amy and Allie, is there a way to have any discussion about that?
Yeah, I figured I'd go through all the poll questions first, but you know, it's a good point. I mean, maybe we should stop here, and because these numbers are fascinating. So how do folks feel about it? I mean, why do folks feel that it's not safe as a driver? Help me call on people if people want to raise their hands to talk.
Yeah, so MB, can we send it over to you? You had a good comment there. You said traffic lights are not timed and driving through is horrific. Lots of blocking intersections. Margaret said the lane redirection is confusing. MB, do you want to add a little bit of detail there?
Sure. I think it's always been a problem. I mean, I have to say, you know, they've done a great job with sidewalks, making them wider, the curbs, all of that, and the lanes. I think there's over painting. It does somewhat get confusing, and there's actually an area where I've almost driven on the sidewalk because of the way the lanes are painted. But I think honestly, there's a lot of roadways coming in, and if you're coming down Chestnut in particular, it is very, very tough to take a left onto Washington. It's the lights just aren't timed, and I think that they need to do a much better job with synchronizing all the lights in West Newton Square to avoid that. So I'm like everybody else trying to squeeze in or fly through, and it's not safe. I'd be interested in knowing how many collisions happen in the square.
Yeah, you've got lots of folks agreeing with you there with the timing.
Yeah, and I just wanted to just interject here. My understanding, and if Julia or Andrea want to chime in here, my understanding is that the lights are equipped with sensors and that they will adjust the timing.
I haven't seen that, and I live a stone's throw, and so I'm constantly in my car going through the square, and I'm trying multiple different routes. I mean, first of all, it's difficult if you live off Webster, just, you know, you got to go right and up and around and loop around. But I have yet to find synchronized lights.
Amy, Mike Halley's weighing in, and I know that he knows a lot about the lights. Mike, could
Yeah.
you add to the conversation?
Sure, happy to. So before in the old design, which wasn't a design, right? It was just an evolution of whatever was there. The different intersections, so the Elm Street, the Cherry Street, the Waltham Street, and the Chestnut Street, all those intersections had signals of different vintages, and they did not talk to each other at all. So there was literally no way to synchronize them. And there was no way then to really change. They would all have to be sort of set up for one configuration, so they weren't very adjustable either. One of the big advantages of the new system is it's all electronics and they all communicate. So things can be adjusted. The way I actually saw Isaac Brazant out last week, out adjusting, you know, for instance, he said, it looks like what's happening is during the midday, a lot of cars are getting stuck in the middle of the intersection. And so he was adjusting the signals during that time. There's like 4 or 5 different times during the day when different cycles have different times to sort of push the traffic out a little bit to keep the middle open so that you don't get gridlock. One of the problems coming off the move that was just mentioned, coming off Chestnut and then turning left onto Washington, if that used to be truly horrific before, or Washington coming through, because there was an extra light, right? There's one less light now than there was before. There was one at Waltham and one at Watertown. And whenever I would drive through, I'd always get stuck right in the middle. Like I've always said, I don't think it's possible that anyone ever drove through that legally, because you would get stuck. Now that light's gone. So it should be slightly better once the timing is set up. But if anyone gets trapped in the intersection, that always tends to screw things up. So there is the advantage now is that things can be adjusted when before it really just wasn't possible.
So Mike, do you know, just with having seen Isaac out there, taking a look, do you know what the time frame is when they may be making those adjustments?
I think actually the midday, there was a change already because my daughter hurt her knees. And so I've had to do pickup at FA Day because she couldn't walk home. And coming through, the backup that was very much further on Watertown Street is now shorter and flow has gone through. The other reason why it's really important for this backup not to happen, and this goes to what some people online have brought up about left-hand turns. One of the goals of this plan was to make sure that if you were on Waltham Street, you could turn right and then left on Highland in one move, that those two signals would allow that and you wouldn't get backed up. And the same is true on Cherry. If you were going Cherry southbound, you could turn left and then right on Highland, and that would flow. And that actually does flow. The backup on, because I live off of Cherry Street, I live on Cherry Place, the backup on Cherry would go significantly further back. And that was a problem because you didn't want backup by the police station, for instance. That had to be clear. So the flow down Cherry does go the way they configured the lanes, so 2 lanes can turn left. That move does flow. I think it's significantly better than it ever was. So it really depends, which way people are perceiving it. And there certainly are still issues with the timing. There's no question. And the change in paint is, it was confusing. It's slightly better than it was in the intermediate step at Cherry Street, but it helps to know where you're going now. And I think people are learning it a little bit more. Maybe we'll come up with some ideas out of this discussion to make it better.
I'm going to have to disagree with you, Mike, on what you just said about getting onto Highland. There's a blinking yellow light, and it's a blinking yellow light, which means if you are on Washington and you want to take a left on Highland, you get stuck at that blinking yellow light. So that actually is not a smooth transition. I also am my 16-year-old daughter's Uber driver to Newton North, and her schedule is so different this year that I am going through the square at 8:30, at 10, at 2:30, and at 4. And it is a disaster. I hate to be negative because I know the amount of work that has been done, but I seriously think the timing of these lights really needs to be looked at further.
I know on the, I think the next door discussion, this is just sort of point of information. The flashing yellow is new federal standard, where flashing yellow means you have to yield on a turn. Before it was a green, but the green worked exactly the same way. Instead of it being a flashing yellow, it was a green, but you still had to yield on the turn. So that specific piece doesn't seem to me to be different. It's a different signal. And I know some people are confused. That's why I wanted to mention, just so that everyone knew that what that meant and what that it is a standard. You'll start seeing it everywhere because it's been shown by studies to be safer than green, because people say green means go and they're trying to cut off cars coming the other direction. But I think it's maybe a little bit deeper why the problem you're seeing.
Yeah, so I just want to pull this back. I mean,
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike, for giving us the explanation of what you know about what's going on. To me, it just seems like there needs to be a lot more communication from the city about the changes being made, what these new lights mean, what they were intended to do. I think you're giving us a lot of background information that some of the folks on this call did not know about. So thank you. But I just want to kind of continue on about West Newton Square. So the next polling question is, do you consider West Newton Square a destination or a pass-through?
Faster.
What if it's both?
Both.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would answer the poll if it's both, but trying to figure out, like, are most people going to West Newton Square because there's stuff in West Newton Square that they want to visit, whether it's a shop, whether it's a restaurant, or a business or bank, going to the police station, or is it mostly they're getting from one side of town to another side of town?
It's certainly both.
Both.
Could be
It's really
both, that's fine.
right? If you're going to Waltham or any of that, you got to go through that. So
Yeah, it's
So if you
looking
think it's
at-
both, put it in the chat.
yeah, it's about 50-50 here in those poll results, and then a lot of folks are saying both. So that makes sense.
So here's a big question too. Do you feel there is enough parking in West Newton Square? So the choices are, it looks like yes, yes, but not close enough to where I am trying to go, and no. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. And it's pretty resounding so far. A lot of
Uh-oh.
folks are saying no.
So just so folks know, I can't see the poll and I can't see the results. I'm technically challenged right now.
So results coming in looking like we've got 70% of folks saying no, about 31 respondents saying no. I'm gonna go. Those extra votes coming in at the end for no. So we're coming in at 72% no. The next highest is 20% at yes. So really not enough parking in West Newton Square. A lot of folks are saying that in the chat as well, Susie, but I also walk there.
But when
Okay.
you go like when I go behind Boston Sports Club, the parking lot's open. So that's West Newton Square. Is it
Right.
because there's been parking right at the stores that you want to go to?
That's a good question.
West Newton Square parking lot is been empty because of COVID. Prior to that, it was full all the time for all the stores, and the gym took up a lot of parking. Now that it's defunct.
And Patties too. It was often
Yeah,
full just from Patties.
Just from Patties, depending on the time of day. Weekends are crazy. I live right on Elm, on the corner of Elm and Webster. And I wanted to just make the point, you know, the lights are great. I agree that if we had a user handbook as to what the heck it all means, it would probably be helpful. But beyond that, there's still a lot of safety issues in the neighborhood with regard to the other intersections where people do not obey the stop signs. There's a children's playground there. Stop signs are run all the time. I've been in the street walking my dogs and had people almost hit me. There's a lot of safety issues around there. So to talk about West Newton Square, I think it's important to talk about the streets other than just Washington Street, because they all do affect one another, and the traffic flows are affected by the Webster Street, Cherry Street, Elm Street intersections as well.
Thank you for that. Thank you for letting us know that. So I guess the question is, there was some parking that was eliminated for the redesign. So do people feel that those were the parking spaces that most impacted the places that you wanted to go? I mean, because Lauren just mentioned that it seems like there's ample parking behind the Boston Sports Club over in that municipal lot. I mean, is it a question of signage? We didn't put a poll question for this, so I guess if people have a response, they want to share that. I think that would be interesting for the city to get feedback on.
Over by the
police department parking. I never thought I could legally park there. So maybe that is a signage question. Drive by there every day. I always thought that was, I didn't realize that was legal. It doesn't have like one of those big public parking signs in front of it. I didn't know it was
Well, it's
legal.
all metered too, right?
Yeah, it's public parking for sure.
Pam, did you want to chime in? Pam Wright is here from also a city councilor.
Yes, so I heard where they took away the parking in front of the shops, those shop owners are very upset because a lot of their clients, they just jump in and jump out, and they feel that they're losing some of their business because it's not there. You know, the city has said that there's actually more parking spots than before, but it's farther away. And so the businesses that are really affected do feel that effect.
Yeah, the Sweet Tomatoes, all that side of West Newton, there is virtually no parking there anymore.
There were a few spots lost in front of Sweet Tomatoes didn't lose any parking. There were some lost in front of like Paper Mouse.
Artitudes. Yeah, Artitudes.
There were a couple there, but they also got a new crosswalk that took them over to the Sweet Tomatoes, directly across the Sweet Tomatoes. That crosswalk is the thing that took out the spots. So and the light timing allows everyone, like all the crosswalks, you can cross at once. So you can get from the Waltham parking, which is by the post office. There wasn't any parking there before, which was a major problem if you went to the post office. That parking is now, you can go across the cinema parking or the cinema crosswalk to get there, and you can go past the Sweet Tomatoes. So they're one crosswalk away to significantly more parking.
I used to always, I don't know how many other people did this, but I used to always park in the Santander parking lot. I know that I wasn't supposed to, but I did when I used to go to La Roma or still go to, Paper Mouse or to Artitudes. But I understand that that's now closed off to parking. Is that right?
Yes, it is. There's some discussions right now going on with Santander. They still have the lease for that, and there's been a couple of incidents in their lot, and so it's being discussed at this point.
So I think two other counselors wanted to weigh in. Is it Julia and then maybe Andrea?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I agree. I've heard the same feedback from the businesses along Artitude's stretch about worrying about people who would, come in real quick and now they're not. But I just wanted to comment that at some point you might recall there used to be a map of the parking, what kinds of parking, where it was in West Newton Square. I asked this summer if there was a new one and was told sometime after Labor Day. So I checked again after Labor Day. It's still not done yet, but at some point we will have a new guide to where to park in and around West Newton Square. So I hope that will be helpful. I must confess that I don't like parking at meters, so I usually park on Pam Street.
We won't let that out, Julia. That's okay. Andrea Kelly, are you on this call? Someone told me that you had your hand up. No? Okay. So I think we covered parking, and I know some other folks, we've got a lot of comments in the chat, but I kind of wanted to continue moving on, and we can come back towards the end. I want to go through shopping, eating, working, and housing as our next segment. So are there brick and mortar stores and restaurants in West Newton Square that you patronize regularly?
We've got some answers coming in, mostly yes. Majority yes, actually. About 75% yes, 18%. I go to a few stores, but not regularly. Few said no. 4 people said no.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and end that poll. Final results are 73% yes. 20% I go to a few stores, and 7% said no. Kathy said CVS.
So do you feel like there are enough stores in the area?
Huge focus A huge number of folks said no. Right away, we saw a big no. 67%, 68% no. Not enough stores. Winter cleaners, pizza.
Okay, so we're seeing so many people say no to that
Yeah,
there are
so
not enough
Monterey
stores.
folks said no, 31 people.
Okay, so what businesses, spaces would you like to see? Restaurants, community gathering space, clothing store, pop-up shops, a gym, that we lost the gym, bike store, lost the bike store, or other types of businesses that you'd like to see? And if there are other, can you put those businesses in the chat?
Good amount of folks saying they want community gathering spaces. Yeah, we got a lot of responses for restaurants, community gathering spaces, clothing store, pop-up shop, coffee shop in the chat.
Oh, coffee shop. Are we all thinking of La
Poll.
Roma?
I miss La Roma.
So the winner here
No.
was the community gathering space with 56%. Got a lot of love for La Roma. In the poll, the winning entry is community gathering space with 56%.
Well, I think that brings us
Public
to,
spaces for performance art.
oh, other, okay. I mean, I think that's telling because I think a lot of people want to find a place where they can gather, whether, I mean, we were just mentioning La Roma, right? La Roma was the best of all the worlds, right? It was like a little coffee shop. It had a kind of a restaurant, and it just had a number of seating areas where people could just have their meetings, do their work, or just sit and just, you know, catch up with friends. And that's something that is vital to almost every village that we see. Does anybody have any comments on it? I see in the chat, no more banks or nail salons or hair salons.
I guess my question is, if you have all the community spaces, would people feel comfortable going with the realities of COVID? Or would they be outdoor spaces? Do we have to reimagine the community spaces? I don't know. But I miss them. I miss not having the farmer's market there.
Right. I think that's one of the questions we're going to get to shortly. So Laura, did you have a comment? Laura Foote? I can't
Oh,
I
hi.
can't find it in the
Hi,
chat.
Amy.
Yep.
Yeah, I put a comment in the chat. I think, we're not just thinking about the next 3 to 6 months, which I think will still be affected by the pandemic, but we're trying to imagine, 3 to 5 years, right? That's
Right.
the purpose of this exercise. And I do feel like a lot of our village centers, including West Newton, are anchored by some historic buildings, which give them character and a sense of space. And some of those buildings are houses of worship, which maybe not everyone belongs to those particular churches, but the architecture is there. And those churches are probably looking for ways to reimagine using their spaces. So there will be chances to maybe think between houses of worship and local groups and the city, how those buildings could also become used for other purposes. I think there are opportunities there. So I just wanted to throw that into the thinking.
Thank you. Karen, you have your hand up? Karen?
I just wanted to go back to the parking situation. So I am not a Newton resident, but I live right on the Waltham Newton line and take the commuter rail. So that upper parking lot that's across from the local, they added on-street parking across from the local. So when you try and pull out, now your visibility to pull out in Washington is blocked. And I've actually almost been hit several times trying to get out of there during the regular commute hours in the old non-COVID days. So, I mean, adding that parking is great, but it's also dangerous for the people that park in that parking lot.
Okay. I'm taking notes, so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Terry?
it's
you had
just that, I mean, you're leaving and people almost slam right into you.
And that's a commuter lot, right?
Well, it's a commuter lot plus other people that, if I go to the local or any of the restaurants, I park there, but it's mostly during the week, it is commuters.
Thank you, Karen. Terry?
Thanks.
Yeah, so I wrote in the chat basically that, I think it's, I love our, the small businesses in West Newton. There are a lot of really great places, obviously Patty's, Shogun, the Cherry Tree, although I'm careful not to watch sports games there because every time I go watch a sports game there, unfortunately my team loses. So I hope that's not a curse thing, or I hope that's just, coincidence, but yeah. But yeah, basically I was thinking, maybe, if we're interested in trying to see new varieties of businesses pop up in West Newton Square. There's this restaurant called Democracy Brewing in downtown Boston, off of Temple Place near Park Street. That's a worker cooperative. And I was thinking, if we're interested in trying to get a new generation of, small, or I guess quote unquote small businesses, something like that might be really good where, where it's all worker controlled and owned, because, my generation, a lot of millennials, it's we're kind of moving past the old Taylorism, mentality of, having managers and then having workers under them. And especially with a lot of the stuff that's happening now, there's a lot more interest in where every worker, works as a team to where it works as a team to basically serve the community. And I think something like that, even if it's not like a restaurant or something like the bike store, if that could be something that could be interesting, and it would be really good, because I think there are a lot of people, especially with with the comments about the banks, who I think are worried they don't want just have corporations just roaming around setting up shop in Newton. They want kind of more people powered stuff. And I think something like a worker cooperative here or there in West Newton Square, or all around Newton, I think would be really interesting. And it would, I think it would really empower a lot of people and, really help build strong ties with the community.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Terry. I'm going to go to one more comment and then we're going to continue on. Larry, Shurian, you have your hand up? And Carolyn, hi.
The West Newton Cinema, post-COVID, is going to need a place for people to park if it's going to remain viable. If the bank parking lot is going to no longer be usable, it occurs to me that the second church, which is on the other side of the pike, has a huge parking lot, which is almost, I never see any cars in there except for Sunday. I realize there are legal issues with regard to them allowing people to park in that lot, but not for church. I wonder if there is a way to solve the legal problem so that that lot could see more use during the rest of the week.
I don't have that answer, Larry, but I think that's a good point to bring up. So thank you for bringing that up. So I kind of want to continue on and bring up the issue that a lot of people are interested in, and that's housing. So I just want to preface that, we all know that, well, maybe we don't all know, but Dunstan East, a 40B project consisting of, I believe, 302 units with some commercial space was approved on September 23rd by the Zoning Board of Appeals. I know that Robert Korf is on the call, so I'm going to go to him. But before that, I want to do a couple of polling questions. Out of curiosity, what type of housing do you live in now?
We got a lot of folks saying single family homes. And the options are single family, 2-family, 3 or more family apartment or condo, SRO, accessory apartment, or other. And feel free to drop that other in the chat. Most folks saying single family. Second in ranking is 3 or more family or apartment or condo with 15% there. I'm gonna go ahead and end this poll. We got one other. So 76% folks live in single family homes. Thank you all for sharing that. That's helpful to know.
Okay, and then the next question is, what other types of housing do you envision in West Newton Center in the future? And that's not a polling question, that's kind of an open-ended question. And Robert, I don't know if you want to chime in first before you hear what other people say and talk about your project, or?
I'm happy to speak at any point.
Sure. Do you want to go first?
Sure, but what's the question?
I gotta go back. Hold on. What other types of housing do you envision in West Newton Center in the future?
Well, I
mean,
think,
you don't have to answer that specific question since you're bringing in more housing, but do you want to talk about your project?
sure. Dunstan East you're referring to?
Yes.
So, okay, so yes, you got that right. We got approved 302 units. It was actually September 9th. And, in terms of, it's really it's a totally different design, but in essence, it will be similar to the Trio project, but much less retail on the ground floor. Just by comparison, Trio had or has 42,000 square feet, and Dunstan East has approximately 8,000. But we have in terms of outdoor gathering space, we have a tremendous amount of outdoor space designed into that project that I think, once built, the community is really going to enjoy. We're cleaning up the whole area in the back by the brook, creating a boardwalk, and several different open spaces, for people to gather and enjoy. And as part of the retail mix, all the uses that I saw come up here on the survey are certainly uses that we'll be chasing at the appropriate time. It's just a little too soon to catch people's interest because we're at least 2 years away from delivery. So that's really just a high level overview of the Dunstan East project. And all our data and all our information would suggest that you could support more housing in West Newton Square. I mean, that Santander Bank site could be a lovely, smaller, 50 unit building with some ground floor activating retail. One could imagine there that would do quite well. And, we're kind of waiting for this process, the whole rezone process on the village centers to play out. We've been waiting 5 years now. Hopefully we're coming towards a conclusion. We always like to design to, a community consensus, and hopefully the zoning will create the type of consensus that, we feel we can work with there. So we're trying to be respectful to that process. But, you know, we had time issues on Dunstan East. That was the theory we had going into the Dunstan East project, was to wait for the vision plan to pass, which it did, and then the subsequent rezoning. But that rezoning got stuck kind of in perpetuity, which then forced us, you know, because time is money and we just couldn't hang on to those properties and let them sit dormant. You know, we had to utilize 40B as our only avenue to permit in the city, because there was no existing zoning that would work, you know, for the type of project we wanted to build, which is consistent with the vision plan, but there was no zoning to support it. So, you know, we're soon approaching that point for the Santander Bank site. You know, we're hanging on. We got a little more time here to watch things play out, but I would imagine if nothing becomes apparent in terms of moving forward with the city on zoning in the near future, you know, we might consider moving forward there with a, you know, small 40B project of about 50 units.
So can you, just for folks who are, I see in the chat, people are asking about how many affordable units. My understanding, it was like 76 affordable units. Is that right?
It's 25%. So it's 76, but, you know, understand when you get into design of the building documents, oftentimes, you know, you lose a few units here and there, but it will be approximately 300 units in the end. And whatever the final count is, it's 25%. But it's 25% at the 80% AMI bracket. And I know that there's a dire need for affordability, you know, lower than the 80%, maybe at the 50%.
Yeah, 50% and below, yes.
Yeah. And I think that's what, you know, the Armory RFP is, you know, is chasing, you know, the lower end of the AMI ladder. And, you know, we'll be submitting tomorrow morning a proposal that I think really addresses that 50% need for AMI in a very strong way.
I'm sorry, you just said you're going to submit a proposal tomorrow. Is that for the Santander Bank?
No, for the Armory RFP.
Okay.
Yeah, they're due tomorrow at 10 a.m. We were just wrapping it up tonight before I jumped on here.
Well, that's interesting. How do folks feel? Not about the Roberts project, but how do folks feel about, is the Armory where would you consider the Armory? It's not quite West Newton Village. It's not quite Newtonville. I don't know if in the chat or if anybody wants to weigh in, where do you kind of see the Armory project? Outer ring of West Newton. Newtonville? Looks like the majority of people are looking at it in West Newton.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Robert, for sharing.
Eventually, I
Oh,
think
sorry.
there might be more development, potentially going to the west from Dunstan East. And I think if that were to happen, you know, Dunstan East becomes the eastern anchor of West Newton Square, and everything will just tie in nicely. And it just sort of expands the square and the opportunities for activation, people to live, gather, you know, all the things I think the community is looking for, or I would hope so.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing that information about your project.
My pleasure. I'm here to answer any more questions if people have
Well, we're
them.
trying to do this visioning kit, so hopefully you're getting stuff out of this too, just like hopefully the city will too.
It's important for us to hear, you know, so
Yep.
I'm enjoying this.
Well, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess we're going to move on to, because we're getting pretty late. Okay. Environment and welcoming spaces. So we've got a few more polling questions here. Are there enough green spaces?
Again, a resounding no. and we can move through this quickly, especially because this is a pretty clear answer. About 89% no.
Okay, does this area feel inclusive and safe for all of our identities? Am I getting too fast for you, Ellie? I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. It's 80% yes, 78% yes, going back and forth. Mostly yes, which is good.
Oh, good. Good. Is there enough outdoor space for outdoor dining to help us feel safe during COVID?
Big no here. We're coming in about 74, 75% no on this one.
So how many would like to see the farmers market return to West Newton Square? I can't participate, but I'm going to raise my hand.
We got a ton of yeses, 44, 45 people said yes. 3 people said they didn't know. Well, there was. And 1 person said no. So really, really big agreement that we'd like to see it return to West Newton Square.
I'm not really sure why it left West Newton Square. I thought it was wonderful. It was on Elm Street on, I think it was Saturday mornings.
Yep. Can I just jump in on that?
Yeah,
So
please,
it
Pam.
moved because of all the construction and the road painting and stuff. And so I think they plan to bring it back. So it was a temporary move to the Newton North High School parking lot.
Excellent. So we can look forward to seeing that return to us in West Newton. Thank you.
Do you mind if I jump in just briefly?
Sure, Terry.
Yeah, I will say, I think it's it's great about the farmers market. I'm really, I think it's a good thing. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to go there much myself, but I will say if there's only one critique I have is that sometimes because it's on Saturday mornings, it has like screwed up the 553 bus movements. So sometimes the buses, because they detour on Cherry Street, they don't stop at like Washington Street and Shaw Street, which is the stop I usually take when I take the 553 on Saturdays. So that's the only critique. The good news is the MBTA, I think, has gotten better on that, but I don't want to go back to square one, if the market moves. Now, granted, if the market decides to be on Sundays instead of Saturdays, then the problem's moot unless the MBTA decides to restore 553 service on Sundays. But I just figured, just wanted to make sure, that's like made it clear with the MBTA, just to, warn riders like on Saturdays that, basically Elm Street's closed, and also to remind their drivers that they should not skip the Shaw Street stop on Saturdays. So
Well, that's a good point. I think that goes to the need to make sure that we have good coordination with the state and in terms of other users of the street. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so what do we have next? Is there enough lighting in our public spaces?
We're about 55, 57% yes. Some folks saying only in certain spaces. If you are saying yes, only in certain spaces, feel free to drop that in the chat as well. About 57% yes at this point.
Okay, and the final question that we have for this unit is if programming was returned to venues such as the Allen House, the West Newton Movie Theater, the Greater Boston Chinese Cultural Association, and the Paper Mouse's Atelier, would you attend cultural events at these locations?
Resounding yes, 97% yes. We've got 1 person who said no. Overall, really overwhelmingly yes.
Excellent. All right, so I know it's running late, so I kind of want to just do a little wrap up, but I also want to open up to other questions. Actually, maybe why don't we do some of the other questions? Clearly, there's a lot to this visioning kit that we haven't covered. So if anybody has other things that we should be submitting to the city, can you can you let us know and share it or raise your hand and shout it out? Because we want to make sure that we give the city as much information as possible as they're moving forward for their this planning effort. Larry and Karen, or Larry first and then Karen.
On the subject of lighting, has anybody been to Moody Street in Waltham recently? Because what they've done there has really made it a much more inviting space to be in. It isn't just the quantity of light, it's the quality of light. And if you want it to be a pleasant place to walk around in and shop in, you need to pay a lot more attention than just putting streetlights all over the place.
Thank you. Karen and then Karina.
So quick question, since I'm a commuter, why did they put a no turn on red from Elm onto Route 16 or Washington Street? I mean, I've sat there mornings waiting and no one is going on Washington Street and traffic is backing up to Elm. So I don't really understand why we can't do the right on red there. We always used to be able to.
So I'm just going to hazard a guess that it interferes with a bike lane that I think is there now, but I
But if
don't have
nobody's
that.
biking and more people are driving, I mean, it makes no sense.
If any of the city councilors want to chime in, or Mike, if you want to chime in to
And
So
honestly,
my underst-
if
so
that's
it's
the
not-
reason, retime the
it's
light
not.
then.
It's not the bike lane.
Oh, it's not the bike lane. Okay.
It's not the bike lane. So there are two issues, and I've got to double check for sure. But one of the issues is, and it's less now because the commuter, that's a major crossing for the commuter rail station when it's at high peak. And so in part, it's to protect the crosswalks. And the other issue is that it's a pretty tight turn, as some people have said, because you've got the vehicles that come over going northbound on Elm Street. And so you can't have those people coming over the bridge and the turns happening at the same time. And so that limits the cycle where that's possible. And the visibility is also not so great. So you can't let vehicles kind of slip out very far into Washington Street because of the tightness of that intersection. But I can certainly try and find out from Isaac and
But
in traffic.
pre-COVID, the people coming across the bridge have a red light and they can't go left on red. So that's not like a viable reason not for us to be able to go right on red. And I've driven that intersection because I've taken the train for 14 years. And the only issue is when you're crossing from that parking lot across 16 to get to the stairs to the commuter rail. That's where it gets ugly, not in that little coffee shop across area. And there's just no reason for people to sit, 5 minutes at a light because you can't get through the first light when there's absolutely no one walking through the crosswalk and there's no one driving on 16. They need to retime it or do something.
So I did talk to Isaac about this, and Mike is correct. At least that's what Isaac told me. It's more about the traffic coming over and the
But
bad
they have a
sight
red
lines.
light. So how is it an issue? They have a red light, so they should not be trying to take a left on red.
Oh, but the problem is that they can go straight. So if they're going straight and a vehicle is trying to turn right on red, so when Elm Street going southbound has a red light, a vehicle coming across the bridge going into Elm could be going on green. If someone tries to take a to take a right turn on red while that vehicle is approaching, there's danger as far as that goes. Now,
I don't understand that because they're in an entirely different lane. So
yes, but look at the intersection, it's quite tight.
So Karen, I think thank you for bringing this up, and we're definitely going to, your comments clearly, both Mike and Pam went to the traffic engineer to go and get some explanation. So we'll make sure that we follow up with you
Well,
about
but
the
it's not
reasoning.
just me. Just read
But
the
no, but
the
I want
post as
to
well.
make sure that you and all the folks that are on this call get responses to as many of the issues that were raised as possible. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this
Okay,
planning session.
thanks.
It's a valid
Karina,
question.
Karina, and then Karen.
Thank you. Yeah, believe it or not, I'm not Korean. I'm her husband, though.
Okay.
Thank you. I have to say that I'm a little disappointed thus far that much of the discussion seems to prioritize drivers, their needs, and their perspective, instead of first and foremost the vulnerable road users in the square, which are pedestrians, bikers, rollers, children, elderly, whose needs should come before drivers because they are by definition more at risk using that space and the road. And the redesign actually put them in greater risk, I think. There is not really a protected bike lane except for a small segment. The sidewalks actually provide less space because of the trees that are planted there. The intersection and the roads leading it should have gone through a serious road diet and road calming and haven't undergone that. So I'd really like to know what are the plans to make the space more hospitable for these vulnerable road users. You know, are there any plans beyond what we've seen thus far?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for bringing that up. I don't know if any of the current city councilors want to take a stab at that, but I don't want to put you on the spot.
Well, I'll jump in since I'm unmuted. So there's an incredibly detailed plan and they seem to follow that. I don't think they're going to start ripping up things until they see how things work. On your comment about the sidewalks and the trees, I hope, clearly they're not making sidewalks any narrower than they're supposed to be legally. And I think the trees are going to be an asset in the long run, and now already just for beautification, but to have some shade to make it more inviting to walk, and eventually a tree canopy will have a traffic calming effect itself by making the roads feel narrower. That's been shown by research. I just wanted to add the comment that as I've been knocking on doors, I'm hearing a lot of people say, I avoid West Newton Square now. So it's a little concerning that, however bad the backups may be now, they would be even worse if all the people who wanted to go through West Newton Square were still doing it.
Thank you, Julia. Karen, and then I think we're going to wrap up.
Okay. Amy, thank you for this platform. I think this has been just a nice conversation for people to get together and talk about their concerns. So I appreciate that. I just, break the traffic question, or not really question, but I find myself at Flora's pretty frequently, not because I'm a heavy drinker, but my dog gets treats. So she literally will walk me there because she knows they're going to give her treats. So I'm like, okay, I'll stay for a drink. So if you're hanging, so I find myself there often, and it's usually during like the heavy traffic times, and I shake my head and laugh at the same time because it's really a gong show. I've seen people driving up Waltham, turning left onto 16. I've seen people going east on 16, turning left on Waltham. I've seen it all, and the honking is incredible. I know that there's no right on red anymore at the top of Waltham Street, and that was to help the pedestrians, which does help. But I often find when I'm crossing the street, I have to really be more mindful of the people driving east on 16, because where the car is supposed to stop versus where the light is not, most people are used to stopping right at a light, and the light's a little bit further ahead. So there's been times I've almost been hit. Like I have to really be mindful when I'm crossing because it's a 2-laner. So if you're crossing, you have to look you know, if I'm crossing from the Waltham side over to like the movie theater, I have to really pay attention to the right because that's where I'm finding there being a lot of issues. And maybe it's a traffic flow, like the traffic light issue, but there's so much, people are running the lights just consistently during that rush hour. And it really is nerve wracking if you're a pedestrian. It's nerve wracking when you're driving, but it's also kind of scary when you're on foot because the cars are coming at you from all different angles and people are running the lights. They're running the lights because they're trying to get through the light and they've already been waiting for probably 3 cycles to get to where they're at. So they don't want to wait another cycle. So it's really, I think it would, and I think someone mentioned earlier that there's someone that's been there frequently, taking notes and paying attention. So I'm sure this person has noticed that. But if you're there around like the 4 to kind of 5:30 or 4 to 6 time frame, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about because every time I'm there, it's the same situation. It's not just like a one-time occurrence that I've noticed this. So it's just, it's very hectic.
Well, thank you. Thank you for observing that and thank you for sharing that. I mean, all of this we're going to try to compile and put into a visioning kit that we'll fill out with the responses to the poll questions and we'll submit it. I'm just going to kind of close out now by saying thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your opinions. And I'm hoping people found that this exercise was useful in bringing people together. One of the things that's really important to me is to make sure that we have continuous feedback. So as we're trying to assess or reassess the West Newton Square improvement project and seeing what people, how they're experiencing it, clearly, I think I'm taking from this conversation that there's a lot of education around why decisions were made to do certain things that were not necessarily shared with a wide enough audience to sort of understand the thought behind no turns on red or different light configurations or street configurations. There was surprising to me the number of people who feel that the new bike configuration is not safe. So hopefully the powers that be can try to take a look at that. I think one thing I would like to see and what I would do if I were elected would make sure that we continue to reassess because our plans are only good for what we see now and maybe hopefully for the next 5 or 10 years. Our streets are going to change a lot once Robert's development comes into play. So we're going to see how that interfaces and whether or not we're going to need to make even more adjustments to our streets and the safety and accessibility. So hopefully you all found this very useful of your time. Hopefully you all enjoyed going out to those local restaurants and supporting them. And thank you so much for coming here. If there are other issues that you would like that you weren't able to share with us, please go to teamsangiolo@gmail.com. We will make sure that we send all the information over to the city and we'll make sure that all the information that we collect will be posted on our website. So it'll be as transparent as we possibly can. So thank you all.
Thank you, Amy. It was very insightful.
Thank you for joining.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night, everyone.